Welcome our champions to Hania English Podcast.
All right.
Today's topic is
Yes.
Donald Trump,
Okay.
a figure who's been in the spotlight for decades.
Yeah.
This deep dive is perfect for English learners looking to expand their vocabulary and understanding of American culture. And hey, even if you're already a pro,
Right.
there's always something new to learn about a life
Yeah.
as fascinating as Trump's. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future deep dives.
All right.
We're going to be taking a look at his life and career using information from his Wikipedia entry.
Okay.
So let's get started.
Yeah. You know, when we think about Donald Trump, one of the first things that comes to mind is wealth.
Okay.
He was born into a wealthy family
Right.
in Queens, New York. His father, a successful real estate developer.
So not just born with a silver spoon, but maybe whole silver service.
Right.
Did this upbringing have an impact on his path, do you think?
It's hard to say for certain,
Yeah.
but inheriting a substantial fortune,
Right.
becoming a millionaire by age 8 by today's standards,
Wow.
certainly gave him a unique starting point.
Yeah.
It allowed him to attend prestigious schools like the New York Military Academy
Right.
and later the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania.
That military academy background is interesting. Did that experience, with its emphasis on discipline and hierarchy, shape his leadership style later on?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Some biographers suggest that his time at the academy instilled in him a sense of authority and a comfort with giving commands, traits that were apparent in his business dealings and later in his political career.
Okay, it's fascinating how early life experiences can have such a lasting impact. But let's talk business now.
Okay.
Trump's name is synonymous with real estate,
Right.
but he dabbled in other ventures too, right?
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't afraid to take risks, even if they sometimes landed him in hot water. Yeah.
Remember the Trump shuttle?
Oh, yeah.
He acquired the Eastern Airlines shuttle?
Ambitious move, right?
Ambitious indeed.
Yeah.
Well, he rebranded it as Trump Shuttle.
As he tended to do.
As he tended to do.
Yeah.
But ultimately it ended in financial difficulties. And defaulting on loans. This pattern of aggressive expansion,
Right.
followed by financial struggles,
Okay.
is a recurring theme in his business ventures.
Yeah.
Which, is a pattern you can see with other, shall we say, audacious businessmen.
Not always a Midas touch then. But regardless, his name was everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like he had an almost preternatural understanding of branding and media.
You're hitting on a key aspect of Trump's persona.
Right.
Long before reality TV, he was a media fixture, publishing books, appearing in films and television shows. Yeah. And let's not forget his frequent and often controversial appearances on talk shows.
Speaking of controversy.
Yeah.
His political journey is certainly a roller coaster ride.
Right. He shifted political affiliations several times. Republican Independent Party, Democrat, then back to Republican.
Yeah.
It's almost like he was trying to find the best fit for his ambitions.
What's intriguing is that his interest in politics wasn't a sudden impulse.
Yeah.
He took out newspaper ads back in the 80s expressing his views on various issues.
Really?
Even making a brief run for president in 2000 under the Reform Party banner.
Wow.
This reveals a long-standing interest in politics.
Okay.
Perhaps even a calculated strategy that predates his 2016 campaign.
Okay, let's unpack this 2016 election.
All right.
Because nobody could have predicted the phenomenon it became.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Trump ran an unconventional campaign, to say the least.
Right.
Characterized by rallies that felt more like rock concerts, a constant stream of provocative tweets, and a direct appeal to voters who felt ignored by the political establishment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
His rhetoric was often inflammatory, wasn't it? Yeah. Some even called it divisive.
It was certainly a departure from the traditional norms of political discourse.
Right.
But it resonated with a large segment of the population who felt frustrated with the status quo.
I see.
His victory, despite losing the popular vote, was a seismic shift.
Huge.
American politics setting the stage for one of the most turbulent periods in recent history.
Turbulent indeed.
Yeah, and turbulent it was. His presidency was just marked by constant controversy, accusations of wrongdoing, and a revolving door of staff. It felt like every week brought a new scandal.
Yeah, it certainly kept the news cycle busy. But beyond the headlines, what were some of the key policies that defined his first term?
Well, on the domestic front,
Oh.
one of his signature achievements was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017.
Okay.
This legislation significantly lowered taxes for corporations and wealthy individuals, a move his supporters argued would stimulate the economy.
But didn't that also widen the gap between the rich and everyone else?
That's right. Critics argued that the tax cuts exacerbated income inequality, meaning the gap between the wealthiest Americans and everyone else grew even larger. They also pointed out that the cuts added to the national debt, which is the total amount of money the government owes.
So a bit of a mixed bag in terms of economic impact. And what about his approach to immigration? That was another hot-button issue, wasn't it?
Absolutely. His immigration policies were among his most controversial, sparking heated debates and protests across the country. He implemented the travel ban, which restricted travel from several Muslim-majority countries.
That sparked quite a backlash, didn't it? Many saw it as discriminatory.
Yes, it faced legal challenges and was widely criticized for being religiously motivated. Another contentious policy was the separation of migrant families at the border, a practice that drew condemnation from human rights groups worldwide.
And then there's the border wall, his signature campaign promise. How did that play out?
Well, construction on the wall began, but it faced numerous obstacles, including funding disputes and legal challenges. It became a symbol of his hardline stance on immigration, but its effectiveness in curbing illegal immigration is still debated.
Okay, his foreign policy, dubbed America First, also shook things up on the global stage. Can you explain what that entailed?
America First represented a significant departure from previous foreign policy approaches. It prioritized American interests above all else, even if it meant straining relationships with long-standing allies.
So less emphasis on international cooperation.
Exactly. He pulled the U.S. out of international agreements like the Paris Climate Accord, which aimed to address climate change, and the Iran nuclear deal, which sought to limit Iran's nuclear program. He imposed tariffs or taxes on goods from China and other trading partners, sparking trade wars that impacted the global economy.
Those are some bold moves, to say the least. And of course, we can't forget about the 2 impeachments. That's unprecedented in American history.
Indeed. He was first impeached by the House of Representatives in 2019 for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress related to his dealings with Ukraine. He was accused of pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political rival, Joe Biden, while withholding military aid.
So using his presidential power for personal gain.
That was the essence of the accusation. Then, in 2021, following the January 6th Capitol attack, he was impeached again, this time for incitement of insurrection.
For those unfamiliar with that event, can you briefly explain what happened on January 6th?
On January 6th, 2021, a mob of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol building. In an attempt to prevent the certification of Joe Biden's election victory, the attack was fueled by Trump's repeated false claims that the election had been stolen.
A truly dark day for American democracy.
Without a doubt. The images of the Capitol being breached shocked the nation and the world. In both impeachment trials, he was acquitted by the Senate, meaning he wasn't removed from office. However, the impeachments highlighted the deep political divisions in the country.
And those divisions didn't magically disappear after he left office, did they? Let's talk about the 2020 election and its aftermath.
The 2020 election was perhaps the most contentious in modern American history. Even before a single vote was cast, Trump was sowing seeds of doubt about the integrity of the election process.
He kept saying it was going to be rigged, didn't he?
Exactly. He repeatedly made unsubstantiated claims about widespread voter fraud, setting the stage for what would become a relentless campaign to overturn the results. His refusal to concede defeat after losing to Joe Biden further fueled the fire.
And this all culminated in the January 6th attack, which we discussed earlier.
Sadly, yes. The attack on the Capitol was a direct consequence of Trump's rhetoric and his efforts to undermine the legitimacy of the election.
It seems like he never truly accepted the outcome of the election.
That's a fair assessment. Even after leaving office, he continued to promote the big lie that the election was stolen, a claim that has been repeatedly debunked by election officials and courts across the country.
So he steps down from the presidency, facing legal challenges and widespread criticism. You'd think that would be the end of his political career.
Well, that's where the story takes another unexpected turn.
It's hard to believe that someone who had faced so much scrutiny and legal trouble could even consider a return to politics. What drove him to run again?
That's a question many political analysts have pondered. Some believe it was a desire to reclaim power and vindication. Others suggest it was driven by ego or a need to stay relevant. Whatever the motivations, his announcement to run in 2024 shocked the nation and set the stage for another tumultuous campaign.
And this time around, he was facing actual criminal charges, wasn't he?
Yes, he was indicted on charges related to his business practices and was ultimately convicted in May 2024. However, he received a no-penalty sentence due to concerns about presidential immunity. This unprecedented situation allowed him to continue campaigning despite being a convicted felon.
Unprecedented is right. It sounds like something out of a political thriller. How did his campaign rhetoric compare to his previous runs?
If anything, it became even more inflammatory. He doubled down on his populist message, appealing to his base with promises to drain the swamp and restore America to greatness. His rallies drew massive crowds, and he continued to dominate the news cycle.
Was there any shift in his policy positions, or was it more the same America First agenda?
He largely stuck to his familiar themes: immigration restriction, economic nationalism, and a skeptical view of global institutions. However, he also introduced some new ideas, like term limits for members of Congress and a proposal to replace birthright citizenship.
Those are some pretty radical proposals. Did they resonate with voters?
They certainly appealed to his base, but they also alienated moderate voters and independents. The election was incredibly close, and there were allegations of voter suppression and irregularities on both sides. Ultimately, he defeated incumbent Vice President Kamala Harris, marking his return to the White House.
A second term for a president who had been impeached twice and convicted of a felony, truly remarkable. What has his second presidency been like?
His second term has been in many ways an extension of his first, but perhaps even more divisive and consequential. He immediately set about implementing his agenda, issuing executive orders reversing many of his predecessors' policies.
Can you give us some specific examples?
He pardoned those involved in the January 6th Capitol attack, a move that was widely condemned by legal experts and even some members of his own party. He also imposed a hiring freeze across the federal government and initiated mass layoffs of federal employees, particularly those he perceived as disloyal or part of the deep state.
Sounds like he was trying to consolidate his power and reshape the government in his own image.
That's a valid interpretation. His cabinet appointments also reflected this focus on loyalty above all else. Many appointees lacked relevant experience or qualifications, raising concerns about their ability to effectively manage their departments. One particularly notable appointment was Elon Musk, who is given broad authority to oversee government efficiency.
Elon Musk in charge of government efficiency, that's quite a departure from the norm.
Mm-hmm.
What has the response been to his second term overall?
As you might expect, it's been met with a mixture of praise and outrage. His supporters view him as a strong leader who is not afraid to challenge the status quo and fight for the forgotten man. His detractors see him as an authoritarian figure who is eroding democratic norms and institutions.
So in a way, his second presidency has only amplified the divisions that were already present in American society.
Precisely. He has become a lightning rod for both adoration and animosity, a symbol of the deep polarization that has gripped the nation.
It sounds like his legacy will be debated for generations to come. What do historians say about his place in American history?
Presidential historians are already grappling with the complexities of his presidency. His approval ratings were consistently low, particularly amongst international audiences, and he's consistently ranked low by historians. He's often compared to other populist leaders throughout history, and there's much discussion about the long-term consequences of his actions on American democracy.
It's fascinating how one individual can have such a profound impact on the course of history. What key takeaways should our listeners keep in mind as they reflect on Donald Trump and his legacy?
I think it's important to remember that his rise to power was not an isolated event. It reflects deeper societal trends, economic anxieties, and cultural shifts that had been building for decades. His story is a reminder that democracy is fragile and requires constant vigilance.
It's also a testament to the power of personality, media savvy, and the ability to connect with voters on an emotional level, even if it's through divisive rhetoric.
Absolutely. His unconventional approach to politics, his mastery of social media, and his ability to tap into a sense of grievance and resentment among a segment of the population were key factors in his success.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the life and times of Donald Trump, we're left with more questions than answers. Where does America go from here? How will his presidency be remembered? These are questions that will continue to be debated for years to come. Thanks for joining us, champions, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating topics.
Absolutely.